How's Sam de Koning played on the weekend? Apparently pretty well. Is he right to go this week?
Yeah, played well, has pulled up really well. So he's about to get out there and do a session which we expect will go pretty well. So good to know that he'll be available.
And any update on Stewart and Humphreys? They're both 100% for this week?
Yeah, really positive as well. So as has been forecast the last week or so, we expect them to be available, no problems.
Is your plan to play? Sorry to just jump in. Is your plan to play Sam de Koning in the ruck? What are your plans, Chris? Without, I know you can't forecast too much, but
Terrible question, Pete. You know that I never answer those.
Sam played in the ruck on Saturday, obviously to get some match fitness as much as anything. What are your hopes for him going into this final?
Yeah. So this year it hasn't been an experiment because we always were confident that Sam could play well in the ruck. He'd just been such a good key defender for us that it hadn't been a priority. So what we were hoping to do as much as anything was to get to this point of the year where we, one, had some depth and we had some options. So exactly which way we choose to go, over the next month or so, hopefully, is still a little bit up for debate. But we sort of need to think a little bit about cohesiveness and stability, but it's not as if we're trying something that hasn't been tried for the rest of the year if we decide to play de Koning a little bit more ruck as opposed to back. So even this close to the game, we haven't committed to which way we'll go exactly, but nice to know that it seems to be at this point that we have all of those options on the table thanks to good availability.
Just a follow-up, should we read too much into the last time you played? Obviously, Stanley got subbed out of the game and you chose to go with the tagger. How much weight do you put on that particular game?
Not a lot, primarily because if you go back and have a look at that game, obviously both teams would have, and I'm sure you guys would have had a little look to an extent as well. And if you don't look any further than the personnel that was in there, you'd see how different it's going to be. So even going back, and I'm not sure whether I said it at the time, but we didn't sub Reece out because he was going badly. But we subbed him out because the team was going badly and we needed to do something quite drastic. I can't remember voluntarily subbing a player out before half time, but it would be wrong to suggest that it was because of his performance.
Chris, the messaging from the club has been that Hawkins and Guthrie are aiming to return during the final series. Have they been completely ruled out for this week, and how are they tracking?
No, they haven't been ruled out. In fact, it's likely that they'll both play. So that's good news. But again, reading too much into it, either way, whether they come up and play or whether they don't quite get there. Again, we expect them both to play, but we think that there's a lot of water still to flow under the bridge before they become available for AFL selection. But certainly playing this week it's a good sign, but far from the final step that they need to take before they're declared available for a final.
So when you say they played this week, will that be at AFL or VFL level for them?
Oh, no, we won't play them at AFL level. No, we've got to be careful of my language here because our VFL team lost, and that's not a positive thing, but it is a positive that we have a game this weekend, and it's a knockout game. There's the obvious situation there that if those guys don't play this week and the VFL team loses, they're not going to have a VFL game to come back through. So that will inform our thinking a little bit. We are getting to the point where excessive conservatism with those two guys will just rule them out altogether. So I don't think that means that we'll be taking a huge risk with them necessarily, but I don't think either of them are at and we've said a few times, I think, over the years that we've waited and waited and waited before we've got guys back into match practice. This is not one of those situations. We'd ideally like them to get a little bit more training in, but there just aren't many games left. So that would be the likely reason why we would play them this week if they do in fact play.
Chris, just sort of seems like this is a really, really open race. Just a word on Port Adelaide's form leading into the finals and just how dangerous they are.
I think everyone going to finals series, I'm sort of working through it in my head at the moment. They're all in pretty good form, aren't they? So yeah, I wouldn't single them out for the same reason I wouldn't single us out. I think your initial comment was a really accurate one. It's been an incredibly close season. And I think there are teams who just missed out on the finals that would be very dangerous if they had have made it. So yeah, I would suspect that all 8 teams are going in thinking, okay, our best is going to be good enough if we can make it happen on the day. I think you've seen that through Port's performances, through the year. Their best is really good. And it's never been truer that, to win a premiership, it's not the best team across the course of the season. It's the best team, it might not even be in the last month. It might only be in the last couple of weeks or even on the day, such as the closeness of the competition. And I think that's exciting for us all.
And just a word on the midfield, obviously over in Adelaide, there's a lot of attention on Butters, Rosie and Horn Francis. Your biggest danger, and in particular, your thoughts on Horn Francis? There's a lot of people comparing to one of your boys back in the day in Dangerfield, just the way he moves and how explosive he is.
Yeah, they're good players. It's that knowledge is not confined to South Australia, I'm sure. We all understand how good those guys can be. Yeah, that's high praise if he's being compared to Dangerfield. I guess I get the comparison in terms of the power. He's still a young player, but clearly a top liner already. So, we didn't play well last time, but they played exceptionally well. And those guys around the ball were certainly key to that. It's a good challenge.
Chris, last time against the Power, they put a lot of time into Tom Stewart, and he sort of appeared to get flustered on a couple of occasions. Do you need to put a bit more support around him and sort of be wary of that coming again this week, albeit I know he's playing a bit more on ball, but are you wary that he might receive some extra attention given it happened last time?
My argument is that it happens every week. There's no team in the comp that ignores him. Now, in terms of extra protection, I'm not a big advocate of that these days. They're big boys. The rules are such that there's not much you can do to protect them anyway. The umpires were actually quite forthright last time, or the umpiring department last time we played them, that he probably could have got some free kicks that were missed. But if you're focusing on that stuff, I think we've got to head in the wrong place. So I said a couple of times this year that our season's ebbed and flowed a little bit, not dissimilar to other teams. We've all kind of had our moments, but we'd like to think that in some of those patches where we were a little bit off, we have learned some lessons and adapted, and our team is very different, both in terms of personnel and in terms of the way that it plays to, say, the midway point of the season. So I think if your question is to expect Tom Stewart to get some attention, the answer is an obvious yes. The next bit, do we feel well equipped to deal with it? Then I would say much, much better than, say, previous times.
And just a broader one, a couple of final series ago, I recall you saying that you're in a position where you can walk and chew gum at the same time when it comes to sort of getting to work on the player acquisition space. How involved are you in that in the next 3, 4, 5 weeks before sort of in conjunction with your finals campaign at the same time? Well,
I would like to think that I am as involved as I would be if we weren't playing. And that's just a reality and a requirement of the job. There are 10 teams who are well and truly focused on that part of the cycle. And if the other 8 say, we're just going to worry about playing and then address those issues when our season finishes, you're going to end up a long way behind. But the fortunate thing from my position, I can't speak for every head coach, but I have such a level of confidence in the people that are largely charged with that responsibility. And I think after a long period here of stability and working with those people, I understand my role within it. So I am involved and I need to be. And some of those decisions, say for example, if there are players considering coming to our club, they can't do that work independently of the head coach. So I don't feel it's a burden. In fact, I find that this time of year quite exciting. There's some opportunity there, and some of these big decisions that are, in a lot of cases, really finely run things, 50-50 calls, they can set up your fortunes for years to come. So it's a crucial time, but it's just, I'd be a little bit offended if anyone in our club thought that I couldn't walk and chew gum at the same time.
Chris, just with Hawkins and Guthrie, if they do play, is it assumed that they're automatic inclusions into the AFL side the following week, or is it a case of that they'll have to perform well in order to, earn selection?
So I'll try to explain it as thoroughly as I can, but there are so many unknowns that's difficult. Generally, when guys haven't played for a long period of time, and that's the case with Hawkins and Guthrie, I think it's unreasonable to put high expectations on their performance when they come back. Clearly, it's better if they play well, but more importantly, it's how they move and how they get through and how their injury issues, are, or how they stand up in that game. It's far from a lay down misère that if those guys get through, that we would play them in an AFL game the next week. We don't even know our fixture yet. But what will become important after that will be, how well they train as well. So, there's a possibility that they won't have another VFL game after this week. Now, that won't preclude them from coming back. But we'll just need to be thoughtful and really detailed in our analysis of how they're going. And it's obviously relative to the others as well, but we're optimistic and we're positive and we're leaving it on the table, but we're not in a position where we can get sidetracked by the quality of those names up on the magnet board. Clearly their best has been important to us, and they've been two of our best players over a long period of time, but we've got to deal in the reality of the current situation. So there's just too many unknowns to be really specific about the likely outcome there.
And just one on, so James Riley and Stephen King obviously came to the club over the off-season. Do you think you'd be in this position without them? Obviously, with Riley's well-renowned with his offensive flair, and Stephen King having senior coach last year as well.
Yeah, impossible question to answer with accuracy. What I can say is that they've been fantastic for us. And I knew James Riley really well. He was really a victim of COVID, and I was rapt, and the club was rapt to get him back. So that was a coup for us, and our optimism around the contribution he would make has been realised. I didn't know Stephen King as well, but became highly regarded, was obviously at the Cats and as a captain of the club before I arrived, but he's been terrific as well. But I can't think of, I wouldn't name them anyway, obviously, but I can't think of too many assistant coaches that have worked at the Cats that I haven't really enjoyed working with and haven't had a high regard for. So unfortunately, the only thing is in 5 or 6 years, there'll be some change there, because that's the cycle of the AFL industry. But we're really, really happy with the group we've got. We think the four of us, if you include James Kelly and I, in that quartet, feel like we've got a really good understanding and are serving the players well at the moment.
Chris, 2 years ago, you went into a final series, probably the favourite to win the flag, but got the job done under a bit of pressure. How do you feel this season going in? And obviously Port's striving to, break a long-standing, not drought, but, attempts been up and around about. How do you feel going into this final series?
Well, I hope I feel the same way as I always do. I tend to look at seasons in isolation. I just, if there is some comfort that comes from prior success, I'm just the unfortunate one that doesn't feel it. I just see the opportunity in front of us every year. And when you work so hard to get yourself in a position where you finish top four, it's exciting, but it's daunting as well. And the stakes are high. And you know that, if you can get it done, it's an amazing feeling. And if you can't, it's the opposite. The extremes are just so magnified at this time of year. But I think over the years, one thing that has held us in good stead is that we've learned to embrace these times. You can't do great things without getting yourself in this situation. But anyone that tells you that they're fine and they're not on edge, or that there's not those moments where you worry about the things that could go wrong, I would struggle to believe that they're being truthful with you. But I think, again, I've said it a few times, that's how you get good things done. You got to take the risk and the emotional the risk of how you're going to feel if it doesn't quite work out. But I'd rather be here than in Bali, put it that way, Pete.
Just a word on Brad Close, obviously 100 games this weekend, not the most notable name in the Cats forward line, but yeah, so highly rated internally.
Yeah, and another really good example, I think, of how we've built this list over a number of years. Brad wasn't an early draft pick by any stretch of the imagination, but really quickly became an important player for us. And probably in a similar manner to Zach Guthrie, a couple of weeks ago or last week, whenever it was, playing his 100th game. It does feel like they're early in their careers and they've got a lot of footy in front of them at the Cats, but it hasn't been an easy road for them. They've sort of came into the system, either via a late pick or by a rookie position. I think both of them were rookies. And now, if you were to assess our performance over this season, you'd have those two guys well and truly, up in our top 10 most important players. So he may not be a big name compared to some of our other guys, but I think opposition teams would put a bit of thought into him, that's for sure.